Welcome to the Practice Impossible podcast, where your host, Jude Pierre, MD, also known as Coach JPMD, discusses medical practice topics that will guide you through the maze that is the business of medicine and teach you how to increase profits and help populations live long. Your mission, should you choose to accept, is to listen and be transformed. Now, here's your host, Coach JPMD.
So welcome to the Practice Impossible podcast with your host, Coach JPMD. That's me. And today we're with Dr. Keith Smith. I'm honored to have him on the podcast. And I met him 2 weeks ago at the Indie Docs conference in South Carolina, where we were on the road and speaking to physicians and leaders in the healthcare space, looking to help physicians understand how to break free of corporate medicine and how to break free of just the practice that really doesn't work anymore. So thank you, Dr. Smith, for joining us on the podcast. And today is an audio podcast because we had a little bit of snafu with the video, but we're gonna speak. We're gonna have a conversation that I've wanted to have for a while. So thank you for coming on.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
So before we go on, I'm going to play something from the Indie Docs conference and winter meeting, and I want you to comment on it. And here we go.
I could fix one thing. It would be the idea that many physicians have in their head that they're helpless and they can't do anything about it. You can, and you can walk away. The idea is not to collaborate with the trolls. The idea is to secede. So that is what I would fix in your mind, is walk away. Do a lead roast, walk away.
So walk away.
That's right.
Trolls. I mean, I just have to ask you, who are the trolls?
Well, the trolls are all of the people in this industry that contribute nothing to patient care or the value of the transaction between the buyer and the seller, whoever that is. But there are a lot of them. They're like trolls under the bridge that extract a toll from people for crossing just because they're crossing the bridge. And they don't bring any value. So I refer to those intermediaries in the exchange between the buyer and the seller of the service in this industry. Those people who don't bring value but extract value from the exchange, I've referred to as trolls for years. So that's what I mean when I say that.
And so you said do it Lee Gross. We had Lee Gross on the podcast, I think a couple months ago, and he was there at the conference as well. So what do you see that Lee Gross did that wanted you to mention or made you mention him?
Well, Lee's a hero. He's a fearless guy. He really broke through the ice and has encouraged a lot of primary care physicians to go down the direct primary care path. And he's inspired a lot of other physicians to maintain their independence. His approach I thought was interesting because it's very practical, just like Lee is very practical. And he recommends that we should not shy away from a hybrid approach. Put your toe in the water and ease in, particularly those that are afraid to just completely cut the umbilical cord. And so I think Lee's approach is a very interesting one. I think that it's a more deliberate and careful approach, but it's allowed a lot of physicians who are not willing to just jump. It's allowed a lot of them to maintain their independence and walk away from the mainstream.
Yeah. And he definitely has something really powerful going on down there in, I think it's Northport in South Florida or the west coast of Florida. And you are doing something special also. I mean, I read, how I found you was I read the free market medical revolution article you wrote in the Austrian. And while I was preparing to start season 2, which really is about independent practices and how physicians can break free of just the way that we've been doing medicine for a long time. Season 1 was about managed care. I do managed care. I'm actually heavily into managed care, and I know that probably is not part of season 2, but it's what pays the bills right now, right? So you started a surgery center in Oklahoma. Why don't you tell me a little bit about you first, and then we can go into the surgery center and how you really broke out of the mold and are doing some amazing things in Oklahoma.
Yeah, so I started my private practice in anesthesia in 1990, and in a very short time realized that I was an accessory to a financial crime. And increasingly, as the 90s blurred on, I became an accessory to a medical crime. The hospitals were poor-mouthing it, and we don't have any money to give you what you need, and patient care began to suffer. Hospitals got bigger, their administrative staff got bigger, they were building on to their emergency room, their ostensible loss leader. And we could tell they were making a lot of money in spite of their poor mouthing, which I would argue is still the case. But we also saw that they're becoming incredibly vicious and aggressive with patients collecting balances on procedures for which they were grossly overcharging patients. And so to be a part of that didn't sit well with me. I grew up in a Christian home where the golden rule meant something. Mutually beneficial exchange. You don't engage in a hit and run with people and sleep very well that night. But that wasn't how I was raised, and that's not how I wanted to practice medicine and to be part of that kind of an exchange or to hurt patients financially. One of my partners, Chris Paskowski, who's an ear, nose, and throat doctor, says, "How in the world can we claim to be patient advocates when we're part of their financial homicide?" So I walked away. In 1997, a like-minded anesthesiologist and I just walked away. We had our eye on an old burnout surgery center that was struggling, and we bought it. We bought the operations for a really good price, actually on a hunting trip, which is an interesting story. And we got started, and 12 surgeons who really liked the way we cared for patients in the anesthesia realm, they walked with us. And so we started this operation in 1997 in a very small facility and quickly outgrew it. And we now occupy a 32,000 square foot facility that we built to suit us with 149 surgeons on staff. And I launched a website in 2009 with all of our all-inclusive prices listed. And at the time, I did not know really how radical that was. The only thing as radical as posting prices was that they were all bundled. They were a package deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really changed things. Canadians started showing up and uninsured patients from all over the country, beneficiaries of self-funded plans, cost-sharing ministries, they started showing up.
I'm sorry. So you broke up. You broke up a little bit. So you said Canadian patients started showing up.
They were the first one. They were the first ones to show up.
How do they know about you? How do they find you? Were you advertising this stuff, or were you? I
had just launched this website, and there was a fellow in Vancouver named Rick Baker, who is he's a broker, and he's a broker in that he helps Canadians find the care that's unavailable to them.
Mm.
I mean, face it, if you're waiting 3 to 5 to 8 years for something you need, let's just call that unavailable.
Yeah.
So Rick ran this company that was sort of like Underground Railroad for Canadians.
Mm.
And he saw our website, and he reached out to me, and we started talking to each other. But all these other individual Canadians found out about our website. I don't know. There might have been an article in a newspaper or something that someone saw, but it was just word of mouth, and it snowballed. But the story then is the same as the story now. These Canadians all have coverage, whatever that means. They just don't have access to the care that so many of them require. And a 2 or 3 year wait for a hysterectomy for a woman who needs transfusions once a quarter.
It's insane.
That can be ended at our facility for a reasonable price. So, yeah, we had patients come from all over the United States and foreign countries, and I really wanted to start a price war. I wanted patients to be able to use our price to leverage a better deal wherever they lived, and that happens a lot. And I also wanted to embarrass these so-called not-for-profit hospitals that charge 10 times what I do and claim to not make a profit. They really need to explain to everyone how they sleep at night, having ripped off the American public now for decades.
Wow. I mean, I'm blown away that you have patients coming from different areas of the country, and if not the world, coming to your surgery center for a discounted or for prices that are not, I wouldn't say discounted, because I'm assuming you're profitable, right? I mean, can you charge what you charge and still make money?
Yeah. I mean, you read about me and the Austrians, so if I'm saddled up to the Mises guys, I'm all about capitalism and profit. So yes, charging 1/10 what a so-called not-for-profit hospital does, we are profitable. But that's like I tell people, it's really hard work not making a profit. They make a lot of money not making a profit. And people need to understand not-for-profit means don't pay tax.
Yeah.
That's all that means. They're very interested in making a profit. And if they weren't, they wouldn't charge 10 times what I do. So they send that out, this not-for-profit thing, like somehow they have a mission.
Mm-hmm.
Well, their mission is to rob you. Their mission is to find every billable code they can and inflict it on you and leave you with a balanced bill that ruins your life. So that's their mission. Our mission, we don't have an administrator at our facility. You're talking to him. Mm-hmm. And I have a full-time anesthesia practice. And our mission is to look patients in the eye and stand behind what we do and what we charge for it and let the market judge us. And the market's been good to us. I was always hopeful there would be patients with sticker shock who would appreciate what we were doing. And there have been. Americans like value, and Americans don't like to be a participant in a robbery. Just like I didn't want to be a participant in the robbery at the hospitals where I worked early in my career.
Yeah. So what do you say to the physician who comes out with a lot of debt, and you've been practicing for a long time, that says that, hey, the hospital is going to pay me X. Can I make as much money in your practice as I would in private practice or in a hospital run practice? I just want to kind of be devil's advocate and say, hey, do you really make that much in a system where it's transparent pricing model with 10 times less than the hospitals?
Yeah, I do quite well. And I'm always interested with that question because so many physicians are reluctant to talk about money, mm-hmm. particularly with patients. And in medical school or in residency, it's almost hush hush, like, oh no, you don't talk about money. I mean, you'll sound greedy. And then the first thing that happens when they finish residency is just drooling. They follow the top dollar, and it's always a bad decision because the people with the most money are the trolls. And so, these missional young physicians, who are at the end of their training, suddenly just become, hogs going to slaughter. Mm-hmm. And they want all this money. And sure, I mean, I had debt when I finished residency. But tonight, this is January 30th. Tonight we have our quarterly gathering of medical students here in Oklahoma City, and there will be some residents there too. And there's a bunch of them that show up, and we are talking to them about private practice and how much better your life is. And how much better it is because you have control. If you're a hospital employee, you're a tool. But if you work for yourself, then there are some choices there that you can make. And there's some choices there for your patients that you can make that you can't make if you're an employee. And I always bring to these gatherings a banker. And these bankers look at all of these young, bright kids and they say, listen, we know when you finish your training, you're not going to have a penny to your name. And we know you're going to have a lot of debt, but you have these initials after your name that signal the ability to, work hard, work well, and be profitable and do well. And we want you to be our customer. So those kind of conversations open some eyes, because in medical school now and in residency, the kids are being taught that private practice is not even an option.
Yep.
And who's going to loan you money when you already have all this debt? Well, we just decided to bring the bankers into this meeting to look them in the eye. We actually have two different banks that are fighting over these people as customers. So I would rather work for myself. If I'm working for somebody else, then they're going to have some control over what I do. And I've seen what physicians who are employees, how they burn out, how they are questioning whether I should have even gone into medicine, and it's because of this moral injury they inevitably face, where they think through, am I doing what's right for this patient in front of me, or am I doing what my employer wants me to do? And that's a moral dilemma no physician should ever face.
Yeah, and they're facing that every day. I mean, if you look at
yes.
Surgeons that are in hospitals, or even in the managed care world, where we actually are full risk capitated model, where we manage our own funds and we're not owned by the hospital. We're actually doctor owned, but we manage the care. So if a patient comes to us with chest pain, we're going to treat them at the office. We're going to make sure we rule them out. Or at least we make sure that they're having an acute event, and then we have them see our own cardiologist within, a couple hours if need be. But if you're a hospital employed physician, I guarantee you're not doing that. You're sending them right to the emergency room. That's for sure.
That's right. And because all they care about is the RVUs.
Yeah.
The other thing they care about is making sure that everything stays in the mafia, in the family. If there is a great gallbladder surgeon across town who doesn't also work for the same hospital, you can't refer to them. You are supposed to refer to the gallbladder surgeon who works for the same hospital you do.
Yeah. If
you're an employee. And that guy may be a butcher. That lady may be a butcher. And that is not anything that the patient in front of you would be aware of. So in a very deceptive way, the pockets are lined of the hospital by their employed doctors. And why did hospitals start employing doctors anyway? It was so they didn't have to be any good. They had guaranteed referrals, whether they were any good or not. I think hospitals got really tired of competing with each other and competing for the good graces of the physicians who were on their staff. And they got tired of having to appease demanding physicians who wanted the best for their patients. And so they just bought them all. And of course, the federal government subsidized all of this through Medicare. But when in doubt, the federal government is always at fault. That may not always be true, but that should be everyone's default, because it seems like it's always true.
Yeah. And so how does the surgery center model that you have integrate with primary care? Because you're speaking about surgeons, you have 140 plus surgeons on your staff. What about the primary care? What about us? How can we do this in the setting of referrals, or just are you able to refer to or do you refer to doctors who are in private practice, or do you just avoid any of the hospital based primary care doctors? How does that work?
Yeah, so the surgeons who work at Surgery Center of Oklahoma all have kind of a network of referral primary care doctors, and then I have a network of primary care contacts that either have my email or my cell phone, not just locally, but nationally. So, a primary care doc like Lee Gross would call, and I've got a patient with a thyroid tumor. Can we work together and figure this out? And so the patient will fly to Oklahoma City and have their surgery, and then we kind of manage that together. So I talk to primary care docs all the time. They send me patients that need hernia repairs and tonsillectomies and all kinds of stuff, and they just contact me because they said, the only way this patient and his family is going to get this done is at your facility because otherwise they can't afford it.
Yeah. And
then I connect that patient to a local surgeon who I know is great. And then they perform, the surgery and everything, happens like that. I've always thought primary care docs should own the hospitals where they work. And that used to be the way things were. My great uncle lived in a town in southwest Oklahoma, and when he arrived in town after he finished medical school, he started the only hospital that little town had, and that little town was no different than any other little town. When a doctor showed up, they just started a hospital. My great uncle's home was the upstairs part of the house. The downstairs part of his house was the hospital. And so this was true all of the United States. That was the default. There are some exceptions to that. There are some hospitals that were not physician-owned, but by and large, the hospitals in the United States were physician-owned until the late 40s, early 50s. There was some legislation called the Hill-Burton Act that Harry Truman pushed through. And the next thing you know, you have all these community-owned government hospitals. And government preys on citizens. So it should not be any surprise that government hospitals prey on patients. So I think we need to go back, particularly in rural areas. I think the way you solve manpower crisis with physicians in rural America is you let the docs own the hospital there. What an opportunity. I know people who would leave urban areas for that opportunity to own a hospital in a rural area. And then you kick the administrator and all of the nurses that have 65 letters after their name that never see a patient in their life. And you just kick all those people out and you take care of patients and you do it for a fair price and everyone does well. So the role, I think, of the primary care doctor is to step up, get together, kumbaya, organize, and own the hospitals. There needs to be the repeal, of some awful federal legislation that's in the way, but that legislation is there to keep primary care doctors from owning the hospitals. It's there to make sure that never happens, because then the trolls are out of business.
So you said something that I think some might say is not, it's hard to conceive that you can own a hospital and do very well and be able to pay off your student loans. How do you show a physician that they can do that this day and age when they're just bombarded with the other side of this, saying, no, you can't do this, and you don't know the business of medicine, and you don't understand how to manage things in the practice. You can go see patients, but you can't do this business stuff. How do you encourage that?
Well, I know a lot of physicians who think they're the smartest guy in the room, no matter what the topic, whether it's law or real estate or investing, fill in the blank. There's always somebody or some group that is an expert outside of the field of medicine. So how interesting. I think it is. I think it's very interesting that when it comes to the business part of medicine, a lot of physicians step back and put up their hands and say, "Oh, I wouldn't know the first thing about this." I think that comes from an attempt to lay guilt on medical students and residents in training who ever think about or talk about money matters. And I think that's a mistake. And I think we ought to be able to have conversations with patients about money. And it wasn't that long ago that physicians did just that.
Yeah.
Prior to Medicare, basically a metastasis into the industry. Prior to Medicare, physicians were very clear about what they charged for what they did. And I think it's time to consider going back to that. I think it's actually past time to consider going back to that and allow the market to judge you. And if you really think I'm twice as good as the guy across the street who does the same thing, then charge twice what they do and let the market judge you. And so I think that some basic economics, understanding value, understanding the subjective nature of value. There's some very basic economic concepts which can just completely transform not just the medical practice of an individual physician, but their whole outlook on the world and life, and on themselves. And it's liberating. So I think that physicians don't know much about the business of medicine because they have shielded themselves from it, and they didn't want to know. That by abdicating that to the trolls, they're now controlled by them.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of kind of getting their lives under their own control again.
So I wanted to go back a little bit and wrap my head around you saying that patients will travel. Let's say Dr. Gross will send patients to you with thyroid cancer, and they fly to Oklahoma and they get treatments there. You're saying that flight, that stay in Oklahoma is cheaper than what they would have paid for at a local hospital?
Yes. And the astonishing thing is even for minor surgeries, that's true. So the northwestern part of the United States is a desert for any kind of value in the delivery of medical services. So we have patients come from Idaho and Alaska to have a carpal tunnel release.
Oh.
And the reason is my price is about $2,600 all in. The best price they can get is usually $10,000 or north of that. So for $8,000 or $7,000, they can travel down here, stay one night, and travel back and be way ahead. Similarly, our price is less than the deductible for someone that's had one of these Obamacare plans inflicted on them. And so patients are better off paying cash than they are getting anywhere near their insurance benefit. So when you have people charging $10,000, $15,000 for a tonsillectomy or a carpal tunnel, and our price is $3,000, that spread can easily be covered, and still have plenty left over, even accounting for lodging travel.
Yeah. I'm kind of blown away by these prices, and I know that you have a website that has a transparent pricing, and we'll definitely hopefully be able to share that at the in our show notes. So what do you see as, and I think I know the answer to this, but what do you see as the role of a large hospital corporation then? I know that you can't do everything at the surgery center. So what do you see as the role of a hospital corporation, large one?
Well, we need hospitals, just like I think we need insurance companies, but we need hospitals to be in the hospital business, and we need insurance companies to be in the insurance business, and neither one is. You see hospitals that sponsor professional sports franchises, and they buy out their competitors, and they buy physician practices, and they employ doctors, and they get in the real estate game. And, the hospitals are just doing all this crazy stuff, all geared toward increasing their market share. That is all they care about. And that way, if they have a high market share, then they can march into Blue Cross and bully their way, to a even more lucrative contract than they had the year before. So, insurance companies are not in the insurance business. They basically are ticket scalpers, and the hospitals are not really in the hospital business. It's a side thing that they do. But we do need hospitals. We just need them to be in the hospital business, and they need to have competitors. And these competitors ought to be allowed to open up right across the street from them without the permission of the hospital that is going to be competed with. So these certificate of need laws that protect hospitals from their competitors, well, that's just gross. I mean, that needs to go away. When I was younger, hospitals competed with each other, and they tried to get the best doctors on staff, and they did that by providing the best care. How do you provide the best care? Well, you try to find the best nurses, and you're really nice to them, and you try to recruit the best doctors, because the doctors, they're going to go really where the nursing care is better, and they know their patients are going to be taken care of. And then in the mid 90s, this all began to change, and money started flowing from hospitals to physicians, and hospitals started buying physicians. And then they didn't have to worry that I'm not going to get any more referrals because we own this guy who's referring to us. Of course, he's going to refer to us. So the role of the hospital is to re-enter the marketplace, and if during re-entry they burn up, then that was what was supposed to happen. But I just think hospitals need to get back in the business of being hospitals, and that means working hard to get into the good graces of patients, the buyers, and physicians who are the providers of care there.
So you mentioned competition, and one of the things that stood out when at the Indie Docs conference is when you were talking about paying your employee health insurance or health expenses. Can you kind of replay that for me and tell me how that works? Because you don't have your employees are not insured, or they are self-insured, or you're self-insured. How does that work for your organization?
So you're describing self-insurance or self-funding. So what I do for my employees at Surgery Center of Oklahoma, and what a lot of employers do, is I pay for my employees' health expenses out of operational revenue. We don't pay Blue, United, Cigna, Aetna to take risk on our behalf. We take the risk. And so when one of my employees needs a knee arthroscopy or a tonsillectomy or a mastectomy, I buy that for them. Mm-hmm. Now, that is very oversimplified so that people can understand it. The way it really works is, instead of sending a gargantuan amount of money to Blue Cross every month, I send a much smaller amount of money to a fund that holds that money on behalf of its beneficiaries, who are my employees.
Gotcha.
And that fund then purchases whatever care that they need. Now, there's a big safety net policy, kind of a Lloyd's of London crazy policy.
Like a stop loss.
Stop loss.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Catastrophic. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And it's there, and I actually pay insurance premiums on that.
Yeah.
But if we manage our health plan well, then the stop loss carriers tend to be nice to us. So our stop loss premiums have been pretty stable, and we have saved millions of dollars. Even on a company with less than 50 employees, we've saved millions of dollars since we self-funded in 1999. And so more and more companies are doing that as the costs go through the roof because, these PPOs supposedly are controlling the cost. Well, they're not doing a very good job. So more and more companies are self-funding. And if you think through that, as an employer, I have the same sticker shock that an individual would have if they had no insurance at all. So self-funded companies care what it costs. They care that a carpal tunnel in Idaho is $12,000,
Yep.
and it's $3,000 in my shop. So employers will tell one of their employees that if you'll fly to Oklahoma City and have this done, we will pay the entire bill, all of your travel, and all of your lodging for you and a companion. And some employers will say, and when you get back, I'm going to give you a bonus for having done that because I am still so proud that I want to share some of the winnings with you. So this is going on.
Can you repeat that last line because you broke up a little bit? What was that last thing you said? You're going to have.
Well, the last thing is, so the employer pays for everything, and some of them will also tell their employees, if you will fly to Oklahoma City or to Indianapolis to my friends at Wellbridge, or I could just go on and name them. When you get back, I'll give you a bonus because I'm still so far ahead. I want to share some of the winnings with you because you did not simply go down the street and buy an overpriced carpal tunnel from this not-for-profit hospital, here in Idaho or Washington State or wherever it is. So, that is a vibrant movement here in the United States. And all the people who think and talk kind of like you're hearing me, they're under an umbrella organization called the Free Market Medical Association. And people are beginning to wrap their mind around the real economics that undergird this industry and how it works and how it can be better.
That's awesome. I mean, I've not heard that explained the way you just explained it. And it's just amazing just to think about that and to think about, if you're doing the right thing, you're also, speaks to my next topic, which is of quality. If you're doing a good thing and your quality is good, then we don't need these quality metrics that these insurance companies and Medicare are sending down our throats. So tell me about how some might be concerned about the quality, and how do you track quality at your facilities? And is that an issue?
It's not really an issue. When you throw yourself out into the market and allow the market to judge you, if you're not any good, you get crushed. So if you're a restaurant that serves terrible food, you're going to go out of business. If you're a medical facility that embraces the market, then you better be ready because the market is vicious. The health department, if you're not any good and the health department, if your local bureaucrats figure that out, they're going to give you a chance to fix it. If you're not any good, the market will just crush you. So we have elected to embrace market discipline, however it goes, however it ends up. And we have done that because we are so confident that the results we achieve are just second to none. So I would argue that if a facility or a physician will say, here is what I do, and here's how much I charge for it, that probably is 90% of what you need to know about whether that person is any good or not, because they cannot make that declaration without significant risk to their career. Mm-hmm. So I've argued that if someone won't say, here is what I do and here is what I charge for it, it's because there is so much uncertainty attached to their outcome. if there's a lot of uncertainty harbored by an orthopedist who does a lot of rotator cuff repairs and he can't say this is what I charge, it might be because he has patients that don't do well, like a lot of them. And so, if I don't have any clue what it's going to cost, that means I have a lot of uncertainty walking into this operation, and that might mean I ought not to be doing it.
Yeah.
So I argue that the market and a physician or a facility's willingness to embrace it is the best quality indicator.
So do you charge differently for complex cases? Let's say it's a complex hernia repair with mesh and versus a simple hernia. Is there a price difference, and is that part of the transparency, or is it a global fee that hernia repair is this?
Yes and no. The way on our website you'll see open reduction internal fixation simple, and there's a price.
Okay.
And then you'll see open reduction internal fixation complex, and there's a price.
Gotcha.
We don't know really until the physician actually sees the patient whether it's simple or complex. So those prices are out there, and we stand by them. However, if a patient shows up and there are all kinds of issues that are first revealed to us when the physician first sees them, then we might say, yeah, this is our price, but that doesn't account for all of these things you did not divulge ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So they are good, hard prices, assuming that there are no real surprises and shockers when the patient actually walks into the physician's office.
Okay.
But I have simple and complex describing several procedures on the website, and they have different prices.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been so informative, and I really thank you for spending the time and doing this with me, because I've learned a lot. I hope, and I know my audience is going to learn a lot from this. I have been doing some things at the end of some of the podcasts called rapid fire. I don't know if you have any more time, or if you got time for 10 more rapid fire questions.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I usually start easy and then we go hard. Favorite book?
Favorite book. I'm going to say Human Action by Mises.
Human Action?
Human Action by Mises.
Okay. Favorite sports team?
Favorite sports team. Pittsburgh Penguins.
Hockey. Wait, Penguins is a hockey team, right? I hope. Favorite movie?
That's right. Probably V for Vendetta.
I think you have a child, right? I think how many children do you have?
I have 4.
4. So this question might not, I thought it was only 1. So one thing your children loves about you?
Probably that I'm an uncompromising radical.
Uncompromising radical?
Radical.
Huh. Name one of the most rewarding cases that you have been involved in medicine.
I would say the family who came to see us from South Carolina in about 2011, whose child's tonsils we removed, and they paid us with the proceeds from a bake sale at their church, from their church. And when we found that out, we just gave them their money back.
Oh, wow.
That was early on, and it really impressed on a lot of people here in Oklahoma City in this community just how missional we were. That we really were here to not get rich, but take care of patients. And that case, that surgical case, completely changed the way the staff that work at the Surgery Center of Oklahoma looked at their jobs.
If you had $100 million, what would you do with it?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I might try to open a hospital. I think I would consider opening a hospital, but it'd be very difficult until some of the federal legislation was kicked aside. But I would consider opening a hospital.
Who's going to be the next president of the U.S.?
What now?
Who's going to be the next president of the U.S.?
Yeah, I don't have any idea.
Told you it was going to get a little bit harder.
Based on the last few, I'm not 100% sure it matters a whole lot. The president we need is probably the one that will not win. So I'm a Ron Paul fan. I always will be, and I'm not sure anybody will ever meet that standard.
Yeah. One thing you tell a medical student today that they should do?
Never go to work for a hospital.
One spiritual habit you practice.
One what?
One spiritual habit that you practice.
Oh, just regular prayer.
And last question. I got this question from Mindy Peltz. She's a podcaster also that interviews nutritionists, and she's big on fasting and intermittent fasting. And she always asks, what would you say is your superpower?
My superpower is probably my wife, my spouse. She eggs me on and encourages me. So I'm gonna say she's my superpower.
Awesome. And so if someone wants to get in touch with you, someone wants to refer patients to your surgery center, how would they do that?
The easiest way is to call on the telephone, and our telephone numbers all over the website. It's surgerycenterok.com, and people can email me, and my email is ksmith at our website, surgerycenterok.com. So I'm easy to find. I usually respond to emails every day. I don't think a day goes by where I haven't gone through all of them.
Wow.
That's the best way to get me.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Smith. This has been more than what I even imagined, and I really appreciate you coming on the Practice Impossible podcast. If you like this episode and you want to hear more, please share it with your friends, share it with people who you feel might benefit from this conversation. And I think that's a lot of us. So thank you again for coming on the Practice Impossible podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.